discretion is advised.
What is your My House is Haunted story? When I was little, I had a loft bed with a desk underneath. I've always been a pretty heavy sleeper. I could fall asleep at a concert. So it was strange when I began waking up at 3 in the morning every morning. What was even more strange were the noises coming from the attic. Shuffling, knocking, boxes moving. My 9-year-old brain rationalized it as an animal or bird that had gotten in. After a few weeks of shit sleep, I decided to knock back on my ceiling the shave and a haircut pattern because I was bored and hadn't interacted with whatever was in the attic. I waited in silence for a few minutes until I was about to fall back asleep, and then I heard it from the ceiling a foot from my face. It knocked back the pattern. Every night when I woke up, I'd knock and sometimes get a response. It gradually stopped over the years, but I still wake up at 3 AM every night. It's weird, but it only happens in my room. I sleep fine in hotels and other houses. 13 years later, and I've just been getting weird vibes around my house. I feel like I'm being watched. I sometimes hear someone saying my name, most notably before bed, and whatever said it is very close to my ear. I can feel their breath as they whisper, and it freaks me out so much that it takes hours to get back to sleep. The shuffling in the attic also started up again, but I don't want to knock back anymore. There's a lot of weird shit that happens. Things get moved. My dogs and cats stare at the same blank spot. But these are just what's been currently happening. I just don't know what to do anymore. My childhood home was definitely haunted. I have a drawing potentially made by a ghost. I can good feel it when there's a presence somewhere. There's a palpable sense of being watched. There's a tension and paranoia in the air that lingers and can even simmer into full-blown terror. It makes you feel very vulnerable. When I was a younger child, I remember seeing glowing red eyes hanging in the air in my dark living room. I thought our house had werewolves or vampires. There was a phase in 3rd grade when glowing orbs would hang out in my room for several minutes at a time, which I interpreted as aliens. My child mind was trying to make sense of things. But I definitely had a fear of the dark, specifically in our house. Most places were fine in the dark, but in our house, I always felt like I was being watched by something with malicious or, at best, neutral intentions. Paranormal things ramped up for me in high school, but to remain chronological, I had a cousin stay at our house one summer while most of us were on vacation between my 7th 8th grades. My cousin Billy was helping my dad with various projects. One night, my cousin was going to bed in one bedroom, later dubbed the spooky room. Outside in the dark, he saw a figure leave our garage and entire our house. My dad, right, Billy, help me. My cousin heard my father shouting. Billy rushed to check on my father. My father had been sleeping and was irritated by Billy's presence. Billy went back to bed, only to hear it again. Billy, help, again. Cousin Billy rushed to check on my father, who was fine and confused by Billy's urgency. Billy slept on the couch that night. I didn't learn about this until years later. A couple years later, my brother moves away to college, and I move into his old bedroom, the spooky room. It's my freshman year of high school. I was always particularly creeped out by this room. But, hey, new changes are often intimidating. One morning, I wake up to see a skull perfectly drawn on the dust on the window across from where my head lies when I sleep. This was the layer of dust facing the inside of the room, not the outside. No one had access to the room except me and my parents, who are not pranksters by any means. I show my mom and wipe it away. A couple weeks later, I'm studying in that bedroom. It's night and the lights are on, so the windows turn into mirrors. I look up from my bed towards that skull window, and I see in the reflection a white silhouette standing behind me. I hold my gaze for maybe 10 seconds, just trying to grasp what I'm looking at. I eventually turn my head around and see nothing. I look back at the window and see nothing in the reflection. I sleep on the couch for the next few nights. A couple more weeks later, I'm lying in bed, listening to a late night radio show. Lights are off. Looking through that same skull window, I see a similar white silhouette outside stride past my window. I sleep on the couch for several more nights. Over the course of weeks, I see more things drawn on the dust of the windows. Generally, it's scribbles and shapes. I'm scared they might be some sort of curse or something, so I wipe them away. Out of curiosity, I put a sticky note on the window that says please write below. Several days later, a perfect circle appears around the note, as if someone had put the base of a paint can up against the surface. This wasn't like the finger drawings I'd seen earlier, but one drawing did really stand out. Link, I decided to recreate it in manuscript paint before I wiped it away. Over the years, I've shared this with friends, colleagues, and they mostly come to the same conclusion as I did before I tell them my interpretation. But, yeah, for the majority of high school, I slept with the light on. I avoided that side of the house like the plague. Little things here and there, but nothing huge. Until it's senior year of high school. I'm in the living room with my mother watching TV, and the clothes dryer finishes. This dryer is directly down the hallway from the spooky room. I suck it up and head over to empty the machine, getting my usual feeling of immense dread paranoia as I enter that side of the house. I bend over and start unloading the laundry, and my mind goes blank, and I lose control over my motor functions. My arms go limp, and, beyond my control, my body stands up, and I hear a masculine voice take a deep breath and hiss in my ear. I immediately regain control of my body, and I get the duck out. Around that time period, my aunt comes to stay with us for a month or two. She has no idea what I've experienced there, but literally on her first day there, the bathroom door slams hard on her, and she immediately has us smudge the house to ward off whatever's there. I've experienced other paranormal things elsewhere, and I've had a couple weird experiences where I think my dead relative warned me about a couple imminent deaths in the family, but this post is already long, and I don't know who will see this. This sort of thing only happened to me once, but left an impression on me. I'm not sure if it was an apparition, or if I dreamed it. I never told anyone the truth, as I fear I would not be believed. My father and his brother Gary were lifelong dairy farmers in central Wisconsin. We lived close by and labor was traded during harvests. As I got older he would send me saying, "You have to go and help at Gary's today." I grew up and took over the farm, and cousin Mike took over for his father Gary. Gary died about 15 years ago. Mike sold the dairy herd and found other employment. I rent his land. My father passed away in 2013. In 2014 I sold the dairy herd. It was an October night in Wisconsin. My cousin Mike started a fire in the wood-fired furnace in the basement and went to bed. His sister had just gotten out of a bad relationship and was living there too. She arrived home from her job at about midnight, added some wood to the furnace, and went to bed too. Transitioning over to all crops. In the fall of 2015 I was driving around the state looking at used equipment. What I told everyone is this: passing through the nearest large town, about 25 miles away, I decided to stop and get a meal. Seeing a movie playing that I wanted to see, I stopped in to see it, then stopped at a local bar and had a few soft drinks before returning home. Passing by his place on the way home at 3 AM, I saw flames coming from out of the chimney and smoke coming from the outside basement door. I dialed 911 and ran and yelling for them to get up. There was very little smoke in the upstairs of the house. Mike and I went downstairs and found an area about 3 feet square above the furnace on fire. We put it out with a fire extinguisher and water. The fire department arrived to put out the chimney fire. There was very little smoke damage to the house and minimal repairs, but a few more minuets and the fire would have burned up into the kitchen. The truth is, I got home about 10:30 PM and went to bed. Sometime a little before 3 AM my father, wearing his bib overalls, something he never wore after his retirement, opened my room door, turned on the light and said, "Get up. You have to go and help out at Gary's." I remember saying, "In the morning." He then put on his most authoritative voice and said, "No, right now." I sat bolt upright in bed. My room door was open, and the light, and the hallway light was on. I tried to brush it off as imagination, but I knew I had closed the door and turned off the lights. Knowing with the adrenaline rush and outs I would not get back to sleep, I decided to dress and check on Mike's place. That's when I saw the fire and smoke. Like I said, I never told anyone the truth as I fear no one would have believed me. Edit, my father died in this house. A pastor died of a heart attack in the house I grew up in, before we owned it. When I was a baby, I was sick with croup. Apparently in the night I was having trouble breathing, and was beginning to suffocate. The ceiling light fixture in my nursery fell out of the ceiling, and smashed on the floor, waking my parents, who found me choking. Parents are absolutely convinced the pastor's ghost had intervened and saved my life. My friend Carl's last apartment had 2 ghosts. One was a little girl who would play with your hair while you were hanging out in the living room, as well as running along the vertical blinds making them swing back and forth. The second I never saw or heard, but I did feel him. One night, I locked myself out of my apartment. We lived in the same complex, one building over from each other, so I asked to crash Carl's place for the night while he went to work. But he had told me don't go into his room. There is a male ghost who will tell you that you don't belong in there. His previous roommate had let several friends crash his room, and a tall black shadow opened the door and said get out to all of them. Freaked them the hell out. So here I'm on the couch in the living room, head on the end of the couch that looks down the hall to the bedrooms and bathroom. I swear I was being watched. Then it hit me. I needed to pee. And the bathroom is right across the hall from Carl's bedroom. Fantastic. So I slowly creeped down the hall, and about 5 feet from my goal I said, hey man, I just need to use the bathroom. Then it felt like a cloud of energy got pulled back into the bedroom despite the door being closed. So I did my thing and hauled ass back to the couch, but I put my head on the other end of the couch. Nothing outstanding, but just a really creepy vibe. On the positive side, at least Carl had someone looking out for him. Apart from specters appearing at random intervals, the most chilling was the night before Christmas. For background, the spirit in our home had proved to be very possessive of me and kept attempting to keep me from my boyfriend and win my attention, maybe affection. Every night when he would be working into the wee hours, I fell asleep in our room with the bedroom door unlocked to grant him easy access. Every night when he got home, it was firmly locked. I heard him calling for me in other rooms while showering, and would emerge to find the house always empty and BF at the gas station or in the backyard. It would sit next to me on the bed, appear to me while bathing, rap on the wall when I was alone, always after my attention. My then boyfriend was deployed, and I was just starting on a glass of wine, settling onto the living room couch we had decorated right before he left. But I was lonely and hadn't heard from him in a day or two. A few tears slipped and I heard a sound. No branch had moved. There was no breeze or fan, but a glass bowl had gently dropped from the tree onto the wood floor without breaking. I stared at it as it stayed in place for a second under the tree. Then it slowly rolled 4 feet in my direction, over the lip of the thick, heavy rug, which shouldn't have been possible, and stopped directly in front of my feet. The first of many gifts to cheer me up. I received a vintage children's card, a queen of spades with torn edges and yellowed paper shortly after. I don't know where it came from. It appeared one day, and when I would throw it out, it would appear somewhere else. The garage, the windowsill, under the bed. One time my boyfriend threw it out, as if in angry retaliation. When I was in the bath that evening, the spirit of a woman sat on my chest, pressing me into the water. I couldn't move. It was like a night terror, but with risk of drowning. She had such a twisted, hateful face. After a moment of clawing at the sides of the tub, I was released. We sold the house earlier this year and moved across the country. We found out that the previous owner had been a depressed, manic hoarder who kept animals she seemingly abused in the home. I don't know what had happened to her, if it's guaranteed she died in the house or what, but the spirit that dwelled there was the unhappiest thing I'd ever encountered. I almost feel sorry for it. My house is super haunted, but it's too many little instances to put into one story. I guess I'll just go with the most recent one. A few nights ago I heard running upstairs. Despite being home alone, I thought it was my cat, but then he came downstairs, and the running continued. I was a little spooked, but it's not the worst thing that's happened in this house. The running lasted for quite a while, plus a few knocks. The next morning I was cleaning upstairs in that room and my cat crawled into a box of fabric. I thought he was being cute, so I said AWEEE and started to pull out my phone to take a picture. While I was still reaching for my phone, I heard a mocking AWEEE right behind me. I completely froze and just let myself process it for a few seconds before checking the room. Obviously I was still alone. That one spooked me a little. I used to live in a basement apartment when I was in grad school. The landlady lived in the main house, and while she herself was super nice and cool, her house always felt really off to me. However, she charged a reasonable amount of rent, and I was only 2 miles from school. About a week or two after I moved in, I had gone to bed, and the apartment was pitch black at night. If my landlady ever wanted to speak to me, I would hear the doors above the stairs unlock, and she would call out to me. One night, I heard movement on the steps, but I didn't hear her unlock the doors, and it was probably 2 in the morning. She certainly didn't call me saying she needed to talk to me. I hear these heavy steps descending the stairs, but I'm so scared that I shrink further in my bed to hide. The floor begins to creak towards my door, and then nothing for a few seconds. I'm not sure if it is safe to relax and go back to bed. Then I hear the doorknob start to turn. My fear makes me so scared that I pull the covers over my head to hide. I prayed the whole time under the covers. The next thing I know it's finally morning. I stayed in that apartment for 2 years. When it was my graduation, I slept in a hotel because there was no room for my family to sleep. That night in the hotel was the first restful sleep I had in what felt like forever. My parents bought at this point 110-year-old house about 10 years ago, and it feels everybody but me has had a paranormal experience in the house. My parents said they've seen a short, kinda chubby ginger kid appear at random spots in the house. Sometimes just standing in the washer-dryer room and vanishing. Sometimes they'd see him at the top of the stairs, and he'd walk towards my room hooray and disappear. Eventually, my parents were tired of it, so they had my grandfather, very Christian guy, come and bless the house, and the appearances stopped. My brother has talked about staying up late at night and hearing someone walk up the stairs. They are very old, so they are very squeaky. Walk to his closed door, jiggle the doorknob, original doors. So there was a quarter turn of playing the knobs a bunch, stop, and walk back down the steps and stop. Didn't hear a door open or close. They just stopped at the bottom of the steps. My mom has also described seeing something peek out from around corners at her as she's sitting watching TV at night. She thinks it's probably just her slowly falling asleep and seeing things, but is still unsettling for her. There was a period of time where the mudroom door would kinda flex randomly like a change of air pressure. This usually happens whenever someone opens an outside door and closes it, but nobody ever was near a door, or the doors were locked. Probably just some weird phenomena caused by an old house, but still creepy. And yet here I am, who probably spent the most time up and alone in the middle of the night in that house, not seeing or hearing anything that wasn't explainable from night terrors and sleep paralysis, which I've always had at multiple houses. Growing up, I used to live in a fairly large 2-story house. I'm pretty sure it was built in the early 1900s, because when we moved in during the mid-90s my dad told me it was 100 years old at that point. It was a really cool house with a huge backyard, but there were some really creepy parts. The basement, of course, was dark, unfinished, and had 2 small rooms facing each other. One of the rooms was creepy. It had these weird dividers on the floor, made of plywood. Kind of how you would imagine stalls in a horse stable, but on a much smaller scale. On the landing heading to the second floor was a big door about halfway up the wall that led to an attic space. The door wasn't attached in any way, it was just leaned up against the jamb. This attic was creepy because on the walls were newspaper clippings of people with their eyes scratched out. Like that is some super glitch horror movie thing, but seeing it in real life was spooky. There were always a lot of weird noises in that house. It was old, so it's to be expected. We would hear creaks and knocks, sometimes the occasional bang, but we would rarely see anything really strange. It didn't seem like a haunted house at all. That is until one day my younger brother and my cousin were playing with a webcam, making a video on Windows Movie Maker. In the video my brother starts adjusting the camera, and as soon as he moves his hand away you can very clearly see something moving behind them, which quickly ducks behind them and disappears. My brother didn't notice, but my cousin did. He quickly turned around to check, but didn't see anything. We watched that video over and over, and I eventually noticed that you can see whatever it is actually materialize while my brother is moving the camera around. Whatever it was, it looked kind of like the head of a bat, but about the size of a fist. I've seen and heard a lot of weird things aside from that, but that was the only real experience from that creepy ass house. Found random crucifixes on doorknobs. We aren't Catholic. One morning, my sister woke up and everything that was in the attic was in her bedroom. She had attic access in her bedroom. Mom was shocked. Sister was lazy. Dad was out of the country. I didn't do it. Explain that. Moved into a 100-year-old house. Anytime I went downstairs while my daughter was napping, I would hear it running through the house. Several times I thought it was my cheeky toddler that had woken up. Figured out it only happened when I left her alone upstairs sleeping. Firmly believed it was just a small child spirit checking on her. Still creeped me the duck out. Came back upstairs one day, told it how I knew it was worrying about her and checking in on her, but that I would never go further away than the yard. That I appreciated that it cared, but it was actually making me really scared. I said that if she was ever in actual danger, that I would absolutely appreciate its help if I didn't realize, but otherwise it was only making me worried. I only ever heard those footsteps once more in the first few days I brought my second baby home from the hospital. I think my little friend was just reminding me that it would watch this baby for me too. We knew a guy named Mr. Weltzheimer had died in our house, and when anything weird would happen, things falling off shelves or foreign coins appearing on the stairs, we'd joke it was him. One day my mom and a neighbor were replacing the toilet in our bathroom and were busily working away upstairs when my mom heard the door open and close and a deep, booming voice say, "I'm home." She thought it was me at the time, a teenage girl joking around, but it wasn't. I was over at a friend's house. When she came down to investigate, all she found were the locked front and back doors. Okay, I was in my bedroom at my desk on Zoom for school, and I always keep the door closed so there aren't any distractions. My room has a lot of empty space, especially at the entrance, and my desk chair faces the window, so I can't see the rest of my room while at my desk. Well, one day I'm on Zoom for my English class and I hear my door stopper go off. You know those spring door stoppers on the bottom of the wall behind doors. I turn around and this thing is flicking back and forth, full speed and everything, and mine is pretty stiff too. My door never opened and there was no one else in the room with me. I was scared to do my classes in my room for a whole month, but it never happened again. I was sitting in the living room watching TV with just me and my mom. The hallway had her and my dad's room at the end. As we are watching, we heard someone talking that didn't sound like it came from the TV. We muted it and heard it coming from the bedroom. The TV wasn't on in there. We both cautiously walked towards the bedroom and heard giggling, which freaked us the duck out. It was coming from the closet, which was open, but we couldn't see anything in there. There was clearly a child's voice talking, but it was weird. Like words were spoken, but they weren't words. It was almost like something The Sims where it sounded like words but was not. Thank God it was in her room and not mine. My old aunt used to complain that the next door neighbors were making all kinds of noise at 3 AM. Number 1. I doubted she could hear them, since her hearing was really bad. And number 2. Those were just a nice family with 2 little kids, so I doubted they would be up making noise that late. When she died, before we sold the house, we pulled up the carpet, and there was ad sort of etched into the nice wood floors, and no matter how much we sanded it, it would not go away. Then the realtor was in the house taking photos alone in the house. She was in a room in the back of the house with a bank of windows and had closed the door of this room to get the entire view. She went to leave the room and could not get out. The door was not lockable and she had to call out the window to people on the sidewalk to come into the house through the unlocked front door to let her out. The door that she was stuck behind opened easily. They even tested it again and it opened without a problem. There were other things that I'm not remembering now. We talked to the new owners after they'd been in the house for a year or more and asked how they liked the house. They said my aunt finally seemed happy with them and hasn't been haunting them as much as before. The kids' toys would get rearranged, but in ways the kids couldn't do it. For example, there was a music box shape sort of thing. You had to put the blocks in to make it work. One day the blocks were just gone nowhere. We lived in a tiny house, and I was super meticulous about cleaning up the playroom and making sure all the pieces of everything were where they belonged. It was a big deal to me, so one evening I'm cleaning the play area, and I put the box away, and the little blocks were lost. I tore the room apart searching for them, looked around the house. I checked everywhere. Next day I walked by the play area and the blocks were stacked on the very top of the shelves, where no one could reach. Another time it was a toy that had plastic boulders again. Putting the toys away, the balls are nowhere. I do the same searching as before and finally give up. A couple of days later, I'm taking the baby to put her to bed, and they were just sitting in the middle of the floor in the nursery. A lot of things like that, almost always with toys. But the other crazy thing was that a lot of the pictures of my daughter we took in that house has a little shine right above her head and to the right. Nobody else. My damn pizza cutters. We have been in our house for about 10 years and our pizza cutters just disappear. At first we didn't think anything about it. Just lost it and got another one. Not too long after that it's gone too. Now I'm thinking it's a little strange. I can't find it. Looked everywhere. Got another one thinking this one better not disappear. I don't even know if I got to use that one before it was gone. I then bought a cheapo one from the dollar store and said, watch this one be gone soon, and before I knew it, gone. There might have been a couple more, but you get the idea. I have searched everywhere in my kitchen. I painted the cabinets last year and had them completely taken apart and all drawers pulled out. The stove was moved. There was nowhere they could be hidden, and still no sign of the pizza cutters. I have not bought another one since then, and have just kind of accepted we can't have a pizza cutter. We still have the original utensils from when we first moved in together 14 years ago, but I can't keep a pizza cutter. So we have this mirror in our front living room, and when I was a kid I had my best friend stay over. And he looked at the mirror and said he saw an old guy sitting on the couch, and I said it might have been my grandpa and told him he was a racist kid. My friend is black and grandpa was Native American, but hated every race. Years later I'm still friends with my friend and all his family members. They were like a second family. Well, his brother comes over who was about a year younger than him, but it had been a while, so he decided to stay the night and we could play some PlayStation. Well, wouldn't you know, he looks in the mirror and sees the old guy too and gets freaked out. I tell him what I told my friend. I'm pretty convinced my grandpa likes to duck with people and he's cremated in a cabinet in the living room. After my friend left the next day I went up to the cabinet and told him to duck right off. A house that my mom, my stepdad and myself lived in years ago was once a meth lab where many people died in an explosion. This house always gave off creepy feelings. First day we were there I noticed blood smeared on the back door, and I thought nothing of it thinking maybe it was just mud. But this was in the dead of winter. Next, I was woken up in the middle of the night by gibberish being spewed into my ears and a hard firm tug on my leg. That couldn't have been a spasm, because it pulled my entire body across my bed. We'd all wake up with several scratches on us. We didn't own a cat, but we had a Boston Terrier that had never scratched us before living there, so we didn't think it was her. Me and my mom had been hissed at by something. Once was when she was going to bring laundry in the basement when she was home alone, and she told me she screamed out loud "duck this," and went into the dining room and immediately called my stepdad trying to get him to come home from work. The inside window of the dining room decided to explode, and the outside one was intact. After we moved out, our distant cousins moved in, and they had told us they experienced similar things before we ever mentioned having anything happening when we lived there. Couldn't pay me enough money in the world to get me to live there again. Click subscribe. If you enjoyed this video,